What are some of the big red flags that tell you, hey, this is probably going to need to be a rebuild?
I think, first of all, if they're using a SaaS platform in regards to like digital accessibility versus open source, like
Okay.
this signals that it's going to be more difficult, not impossible, but in regards to what the client is going to have to dedicate in terms of timing and budget, it's going to be more significant. Then the second, I think, aspect would be, if they haven't updated, their ecosystem, and not necessarily just the e-commerce website, but their ecosystem, IT ecosystem in general, like for a prolonged period of time, then yeah, definitely this means like we're going to have to redo things from scratch. And just in general, seeing like how compliant they are at that point. Maybe they have already taken certain steps in regards to digital accessibility. If they haven't, and for example they're using a theme, it's also a red flag. That means we're going to have to start from scratch. So it's a very like case by case basis, but it's honestly, I'm not going to hide it because it's quite tough. A lot of clients are still in this retrospect kind of like, okay, well, we'll see if we get fined, kind of like YOLO. We'll see if, we'll get impacted and then we'll think about it. Because, saying to a client, hey, this regulation is coming into force and you're going to have to fork out and like redo your whole like e-commerce platform. A lot of them are like, no, like we're just not ready. So and we try to like make concessions and kind of like maybe like not necessarily redo like the whole block, like redo like the most important pages, for example, kind of work with them and see how this can be done.
Hey, everybody, it's Roger with Kinsta. I'm joined today by a new friend, Lillie. Hey, Lillie, how are you?
Hey Roger, how are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk with you. We met very briefly at the end of WordCamp Europe at
Mhm.
the after party on the dance floor. So we didn't get a good chance to talk about a whole lot of stuff. I know that you're living in Paris and you have an amazing agency. But past that, I really don't know a lot about you. So I'd love to just hear how you got into digital marketing. What like caused you to end up where you're at today?
Okay. Well, I first of all, it was really nice meeting you at WordCamp. I think this year's WordCamp was really special, and your
Hmm.
dance moves were definitely definitely attracting all the attention of several people. Everyone there, putting everyone in the mood after like a very intense, couple of days with meetings and just getting to know everyone, seeing all the products. In general, I just like love the energy of WordCamp. But in regards to what I do, so I run a web agency specialized in e-commerce automation, and compliance in the context of e-commerce. So we're kind of at the intersection between web development and consulting in regards to compliance topics. And when I speak about compliance, it's probably like a very boring topic for, a lot of people, and, especially like many developers in the web development space, they prefer to avoid it. So when I speak about compliance, I speak about topics related to electronic invoicing, VAT regulation, which is like a big thing in Europe, like sales tax in the US, GDPR, digital accessibility, payment security, product safety regulation in EU, green IT, essentially like various regulations that change depending on the market that our clients look to expand to or sell on. And yeah, today it can no longer be like an afterthought that it used to be. It impacts the way you structure data, it impacts your infrastructure, hosting, workflows behind the scenes. So yeah, this is kind of our bread and butter, and we're basically helping our clients anticipate all the various needs that they might have, and we integrate it into project scope before we start web development. It's a very interesting topic, honestly, in the sense that in Europe, a little less in the US, but also in the US, like depending which regulation we're referring to. But it's an interesting topic because it changes a lot. There's a lot of complexification on the regulation market and depending on the country. So you're never exactly doing the same thing. Like it changes a lot. So yeah, that's what we do.
Fascinating. I want to dive more into that, but
Mhm.
let's back it up a little bit. Did you go to school for regulatory compliance issues?
No,
Like,
not
how
at
did,
all. So
okay,
my background, my personal background, I did my bachelor's degrees in journalism, in
okay.
television journalism actually, which I never worked in this field, but I think it kind of allowed me to get, and back in the day, honestly, it was not something you studied, like anything in relation to e-commerce. It was not an industry per se. Like it started developing way later. And then I did my master's. I got my master's degree in London for digital marketing, essentially. So that's also like you couldn't study e-commerce then. And yeah, but basically like all my career, I worked for other companies before starting my own. All my career has been in e-commerce. So at this point, it's more than a decade, and it kind of came naturally. I guess this was the time when it was just up and coming, starting to develop, and then I kind of got lucky in a sense because COVID happened and it allowed us to like push through, and all of a sudden there was a higher demand for these kind of like more specialized and niche services. Before it was kind of like the Wild West. A lot of countries have regulation, but a lot of them were like subject to interpretation, and there was a lot of like strategic ambiguity taken by certain companies. You could interpret one thing like to your own benefit rather than actually like looking at what it means like deep inside, like deep within the phrase. So yeah, and this is kind of where it came about, like during this period. And before we were just basically an agency and kind of doing a lot of different things. And after that, we started, getting more niche. And since then, this is kind of what we do.
Okay, excellent. So again, backing up a little bit, when did WordPress come into your sphere of influence?
Since the very beginning, since I started working with WordPress in 2018. So when I started my career, because we were setting up an e-commerce website, so it was always e-commerce. It was WordPress WooCommerce combo.
Okay.
And yeah, we were setting up a website, and I was leading like the department, like launching like this new e-commerce division for a French brand back in the day. And I kind of got to like build my own team, but this was like very new. And honestly, it was kind of organic. I don't even remember like evaluating any like other CMS systems. It's just like, it just came into my life, and yeah, and then it just stuck around a decade later.
Excellent. Okay, so fast forward, you're working with WooCommerce already, you start your agency, and like all agencies, you kind of probably just started taking work that kind of came your way. What was the pivotal moment that made you realize, hey, we can really niche down into regulatory compliance?
I mean, I think there were two things. Like, first of all, like the 80-20 rule, the Pareto rule, and at some point, the teams were like overflowing like with tasks that were not necessarily like bringing us that much revenue, and we were all burnt out, exhausted, like working so much, and you couldn't really see like the bottom line improve. So like from a financial standpoint, that was this aspect. And then the pandemic happened, and it was just the perfect time, because before, like a lot of like governments, they were, e-commerce was not generating as much revenue. It was there, but it was not a focus of the government in regards to sales. And it was a very like, again, like Wild West. Everyone was doing many different things. And during this period, there were so many regulations that started kind of to shape and form that even bigger companies, this is when we started getting bigger clients also, because they were struggling to interpret like the impact that it would have on their e-commerce platform. And a lot of the projects that we got initially were actually projects where we had to redo something done by another agency, because they would finish the web development without like taking into consideration all the legal and regulatory aspects. But today, unfortunately, sometimes you just literally have to redo things from scratch because it impacts like so many different things. So this is what we started doing, and then we realized, yeah, like this is a good niche. There were still to this day, I think it's a fantastic niche, because not many companies want to dig deep, although we are not like in any way, shape, or form say to clients like this is what we're supposed to do. We're more like on the advisory side. And of course, if it's a bigger corporate client, they always have their own legal team, but it kind of facilitates, because we're guiding them in regards to, okay, guys, you need to pay attention to this and this and this. And, for medium-sized businesses, and when I say medium-sized businesses in Europe, it's like also like companies with more than, 2,000-3,000 employees. So they also like struggle navigating the landscape when they're launching their, e-commerce platform. So we say, did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you think about this? And it kind of allows them to understand like things that they have to pay attention to, and also where the budget's gonna, have to be spent, even if they don't like it. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. So fantastic. As you're talking about regulatory, right, there's a lot of things that kind of fit under that. We've got privacy, accessibility. I know that this month there was a new act in the EU for accessibility. Has that been a major focus for your team?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So the European Accessibility Act has been in place for like several years right now, but what's happening specifically starting from June 28th this year is that it's going to be start being enforced for companies with more than 10 employees and more than 2 million euros turnover. So and it's either or, so either the company has more than 10 employees or their turnover is more than 2 million, which was not the case before. Before it was only companies with more than 250 million turnover, so like only like huge enterprise level clients. Now it came essentially to a point that, almost every industry that has an e-commerce website and that operates online, because essentially even like smaller businesses can be this can be applicable to them. So yeah, this definitely has been a big focus of ours. Another major change is that the companies are going to be fined right now for non-compliance. Before, the penalties were not clear. It was kind of more on the recommendation side, right? The company would need to have an accessibility statement on their website, but it would not necessarily mean if they didn't, like there would be a fine. Like yes, they would be contacted by regulating institutions in order like to eventually make their website more compliant in regards to accessibility, but that didn't mean they would get fined. Now it's between 20,000 to 50,000 euros, renewable every 6 months for non-compliance. So it's getting like very, very specific. So yeah.
Excellent. So the time's clicking. We got 8 days away. Whenever this gets published, probably be after it actually goes out. You mentioned earlier that sometimes it's easier just to start from scratch and like rebuild the whole site from the beginning. When you're talking with clients and you're trying to evaluate how deep you have to cut, right, and like redo things, what are some of the big red flags that tell you, hey, this is probably going to need to be a rebuild?
I think first of all, if they're using, again, like I don't want to get too much into this discussion because it's like a very large topic, but if they're using a SaaS platform in regards to like digital accessibility versus open source, like this signals that it's going to be more difficult, not impossible, but in regards to what the client is going to have to dedicate in terms of timing and budget, it's going to be more significant. Then the second, I think, aspect would be, if they haven't updated, their ecosystem, and not necessarily just the e-commerce website, but their ecosystem, IT ecosystem in general, like for a prolonged period of time, then yeah, definitely this means like we're going to have to redo things from scratch. And just in general, seeing like how compliant they are at that point, maybe they have already taken certain steps in regards to digital accessibility. If they haven't, and for example, they're using a theme, it's also a red flag. That means we're going to have to start from scratch, So it's a very like case by case basis, but it's honestly, I'm not going to hide it because it's quite tough. A lot of clients are still in this retrospect kind of like, okay, well, we'll see if we get fined, kind of like YOLO, we'll see if, we'll get impacted and then we'll think about it. Because saying to a client, hey, this regulation is coming into force and you're going to have to fork out and like redo your whole like e-commerce platform. A lot of them are like, no, like we're just not ready. So and we try to like make concessions and kind of like maybe like not necessarily redo like the whole block, like redo like the most important pages, for example, kind of work with them and see how this can be done.
Absolutely. So there's the carrot and the stick, right, with all of this, and the regulations, obviously the stick. On the carrot end of things, hey, when you make a site accessible, it means it's easier to use for not just people with disabilities, but all of us.
Everyone.
How much of that discussion do you bring into these conversations?
A lot, actually. And in regards to SEO, for example, like it has a positive impact for the website being accessible, like in terms of loading speed for the website performance. In general, I think it's digital accessibility is just like an all-encompassing term for like many other aspects, like in regards to the website or e-commerce platform that can be included. And we of course mentioned that, but again, yeah, it just depends like on the client and their priorities. Like we also work a lot with luxury brands, and a lot of the times they're very attached to like their graphic identity.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot, even if it's not accessible, the way they want to present visually things on the website in regards to UX, UI, you still have to kind of just like leave it at as it is, because this is their, graphic identity, this is their brand identity, and it's non-negotiable to change it, even if they're not compliant.
Okay, so spicy conversations can
Yeah,
occur, I'm imagining.
definitely. Sometimes at one time we had literally for like, I think 4 hours, like every like other day for a week, a conversation about one button, like on a website. Just to tell you how like deep it gets. And if you tell this to the outsider, like people are gonna think like this is ridiculous. Like what are you guys talking about? This doesn't. You're not saving lives. Like what? Why is it such a big topic of discussion? So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, people get very passionate, very attached to their designs. I totally understand that. As far as clients are concerned, you're based in France, but do you service clients all over the EU, all over the world? Where do you work mostly?
I mean, majority of our clients are based in the EU. I would say like 90%, and then we have like 10% that are based in the UK. So
Okay.
I know a
Okay.
lot of like agency work with the US market, which is probably like more dynamic, but yeah, like we historically, this has kind of been, our area of expertise. And again, like I think in regards to regulation, we're just like stronger.
Sure.
And Europe is more regulated.
Well, most
There's
certainly.
there's also that. So yeah.
Most certainly. Switching gears a little bit, when it comes to privacy regulation, where do you see companies are having the biggest struggle with becoming compliant?
I think like today, the main issue is that the perimeter of what the companies need to do in order to be GDPR compliant is very clear. The actual setup and how you're going to be processing data in the long term and how it's going to be used, this is like less clear. A lot of the clients are also like very attached to their Google Analytics and like their statistics. So for them, it's hard to accept the discrepancies you might have in your statistics because, a lot of users just didn't accept the cookies.
Sure.
But also because the regulation is just changing all the time, right? Even like the Google Analytics situation, like last year, for example, in Europe, a lot of the projects that we were working on, we had to migrate them to another analytics solution that was more hosted like server side because like Google was not compliant. And then Google all of a sudden like announced, you could anonymize data. You didn't have to like have specific information per user. We rolled back and went back to J4 just because the interface is, more familiar for, people who work in marketing. And they're also not used to like other like service, like technical server side tools in order to analyze data. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Fascinating stuff. So Lillie, this has been a really great conversation. I really appreciate your insights into, how you got things started and where you're working in regulatory compliance. I hope to have you back on at some point. In the meantime, though, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to hire you, if they want to talk to you, what are the best ways for people to reach out?
They can reach out to me personally on LinkedIn and we'll get in touch with the client to advise on the best strategy for their multi-international e-commerce regulatory compliance website.
Excellent. Lillie, I really appreciate your time and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks for your time, Roger, and thanks for your positive energy.